So I truly do want to help some more people learn this business model and apply it to their agencies, or even start an agency and grow kind of like a lifestyle agency. And I'm challenging myself in this next quarter. I'm going to bring on 5 students and help each one of them get to $20,000 per month recurring by the end of next quarter.
Welcome to Show Me the Nuggets, where each week Joe chats with world-class entrepreneurs to find out the key principles, strategies, and processes that lie behind their outstanding achievements. Now, your host, the no-bullshit serial entrepreneur, Joe Troyer.
Hey everybody, it's Joe Troyer, and welcome to Show Me Mike's Nuggets. No, I'm just kidding. Show Me the Nuggets. Today we have with us a very special guest. Such a special guest, I always give him a hard time. He's got 2 last names and becoming a really close friend very quickly. Mike Gore-Hickman, our special guest today. Really excited to hang out with and really break apart what he's been able to do in the agency space. We'll get into all the details and all the nuggets, but Mike really has done something that a lot of people haven't. He built an inbound attraction-based marketing system, inbound marketing funnel that built a $20,000 a month recurring agency business in just 90 days. And I think not only that, like just the way that Mike goes about building his agency is the opposite of most people and most successful agencies that I know. It's all about minimum effective dose. It's all about leverage. It's all about keep it small, keep it all. And I just love where his mind's at. And I've been wanting to have him on the podcast for some time. So guys, give it up for Mike Gore-Hickman.
Hey, Joe. Hey, guys. Just one little correction there. Got to a 20K per month recurring agency while I was working a full-time job.
Yeah.
Forgot that little piece.
Yeah, forgot that little piece. That's a little important. While working a full-time job, definitely hard. And I know that one of the things I love is that like you still have that mindset of keeping your time investment in the agency small, which I want to make sure that we jump in. And you're really thinking about how much time am I working? What is the business giving back to me? You know, so many people as entrepreneurs, and I'm guilty of this, have a new project, they get excited about something and they just throw themselves in and never come back out. Right. And it's like, man, I really traded one job for another. So, man, let's step back for a second and let's talk about how you ended up in this crazy world of digital marketing.
Yeah, I mean, how I originally got in digital marketing is like a really long story, probably not one that we have enough time here. But anyway, I have a friend of mine had a startup marketing company and he invited me in. He was like, hey, this is what we're doing. We need a guy like you on our team. Do you want to come help us out? And, you know, at the time I was like freshly married. I think I was only married for like a month or 2 at this time. I'm like, hey, honey, I'm going to quit my job and join a online marketing company. And she's like, no, you're not. So I think actually back then is when I really started this mindset of like being able to do that minimum effective dose. And I had to really prove to my wife initially that I could do this like new online marketing thing and my full-time job at the same time. So I was an employee at 2 companies at the same time. This second company, the marketing company, took off. I was really fortunate to be able to, you know, be part of a marketing company that went from like 0 to just about 10 million in just a few years. Learned a crazy amount during that time. And yeah, that's really what the incubator that really kicked off my journey into internet marketing.
Man, that's so awesome. And having the privilege like you did to just be involved in a company like that, in a startup environment like that, to go from 0 to 10 million a year in this space, in the agency services world is very unheard of, right? Like that's an unparalleled opportunity. I'd love to, if you would, give me a couple of takeaways in that journey as you were part of that scale from 0 to 10 million.
Totally. I mean, one of the probably the most important thing that I learned is the power of actually having a niche or a niche. I'm just going to use the term niche for this podcast. Is having a niche, marketing systems, the power of what effective messaging can actually do to a person or an industry. And also the power that a great result can have on someone else's business. Like if you can provide someone a really good result, like and their testimonial for you, that trickle down that's going to have back on your business and your life is so incredible. So as much as I talk about, saving my time and protecting my business and things like that, if I didn't get results for my clients, I wouldn't be here, right? That's really the most important thing. So if you can get great results for your clients and you can kind of step back, then that's how you can kind of set this up.
That's awesome, man. So then what happened? What was the transition point where you're working for this company, they go 0 to 10 million, you start building this agency on your own? Like, tell us about that next transition, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur like through and through. So as amazing as this company was, as great of an opportunity it was, as cool as my job was, I was still working a lot of hours, right? I was still working a lot of hours, and most importantly, I was working for somebody else. They were paying me great too, so I had nothing to complain about there. But obviously, as many of you agency entrepreneurs know, you can't work for somebody else no matter how good it is. I mean, my boss at the time, he actually quit his like executive job at Tesla to be an entrepreneur. So he gets it more than really anyone. Um, yeah, I started exploring different like side hustles. I did some like sales consulting for a little bit, but that ended up taking like way too much of my time. Didn't fit my life ethos. I mean, I had a friend try to invite me into like an MLM at the time. I was like, maybe not. But anyway, I had a friend that introduced me to the concept of a marketing agency where you essentially use like third-party contractors like Invisible PPC to do the product fulfillment for you, so that I could just focus on the marketing and sales and customer success, and then not worry about the customers actually getting results, because that was the part that I was the least familiar with. I meant having conversations with customers is easy. Setting up UTM tracking parameters on a Google Ads campaign, not so easy, not so wheelhouse for me. So if I could outsource that for like 30% cost of goods sold, I had a perfectly infinitely scalable business with no staff and an ability to keep my time. So just them explaining that business to me, I fell in love with it. And that's when I really had laser focus. Like, this is this is where my life has to go. And that's the path that I followed.
I love it, man. I feel like in the agency space, nobody really has that concept of minimum effective dose. It's just like, we're going to do all this stuff. We're going to serve all these people. We're going to do all these different services. We're going to choose all these different niches. And I tell people, I feel like till I'm blue in the face, like, man, you got to pick a niche. Like, you're really smart. You got a good thing going on. You built a great, for all intents and purposes, like general agency business. But the reason like you haven't really moved the mark for the last 2 years is because you haven't picked a lane. Like you, like it's no wonder. What would you tell somebody in that scenario, like being there and going through that experience your firsthand?
Man, I've seen so many agencies, like generalist agencies, offer everything to everyone. Like on their websites, it's almost like a status symbol for some people. It's like, oh, I can offer SEO and PPC and Facebook ads and websites, and I'll mow your lawn for you too, right? And I mean, if you're in that spot right now, I mean, 100% of the time, you're going to be absolutely buried in client work. You get a client, you fulfill on their website and then set up their SEO and then whatever else. And then once you're done fulfilling for that client, it's like, okay, let's start looking for the next client. I mean, it makes sense on the high level. You're like, hey, if I offer more services, I'm going to get more customers. But that's not really the way that it actually works. It's counterintuitive. It's like you need to pick one type of customer, offer one service, productize that service. So basically, like, give it your own spin. So you're not just selling PPC, you're not just selling SEO or Facebook ads. Like, you actually call it something, like your, you know, the Nuggets method or whatever, and then sell that one specific product to that one specific person, because that's you solving a problem. You're gonna get that's how you really scale anything. Because if you ever watch that McDonald's movie, what's it called, The Founder,
Yep.
they're like they like got mad at their like El Paso franchise because they're selling like bean burritos.
Yep.
And
They're off
Ray's
brand.
like, you can't do this. You got to sell burger, fries, drinks, and shakes. And if you can perfect that, like, they obviously scaled and they're huge. But if you can just solve one problem for one person, not only is your fulfillment going to be a lot easier and you're not going to be buried in work, but your sales and marketing is going to be so much easier, so much more streamlined, and you can start setting up automated systems. Like I have automated customer success email follow-ups. I have onboarding email automation. I have marketing email automation. None of that would be possible if I was a generalist offering different solutions to different people.
That makes perfect sense. So when you think about minimum effective dose, and specifically in your agency, like what are the big things that you work on, right? Like if you took like 80-20 practice principle and you applied it to itself, I think that's 96-4, right? Like that's what you do such a good job with, I feel, is like you don't let like shiny object syndrome get to you near as much. I'm sure it still does, but near as much as most agencies. And you're really focused on a couple of things. I think you do those things really well and you let the rest just be as is. So if you were giving me advice saying, Joe, if you can just focus on these 3 or these 4 things, what are those things that you think are the big levers?
I mean, yeah, that's a good question. And yeah, really important, probably the most important one. Number one is like and as much as agency owners hate hearing this, you have to pick a niche, right? You just absolutely have to pick a niche, pick a service delivery. And basically the way that you pick a service delivery is like, out of all of the different services for this one niche, what's the one thing that's going to move the needle the most for them? Right? Is it PPC? Is it Facebook ads? Is it SEO? Is it a website? Is it whatever it is? Doesn't matter. What is going to move the needle the most for those people? And then really just focus all your energy and time on finding more people to sell this one solution to. And also being able to say no. If a customer comes to you and, outside of your niche and they're like, hey, can you help with, like I had a customer come to me and I know nothing about real estate leads. He's like, hey, can you help my agency, real estate agents or real estate broker get more home leads? Like they're ready to pay some serious money and they heard about you somewhere. And I was like, I mean, hey, it would be nice to have an extra, $3K recurring, but at what cost? Right? I'm going to have to figure all of this out. I'm going to have to take all of this time that I spend on sales and marketing and working out and, hanging out with my kid, to now figure out this new problem for this customer that I'm not really passionate about and doesn't fit my life ethos. So you got to be able to say no, even if it's really appealing. And even if you could use that money, I mean, that's important.
Dude, you said it so well. I didn't want to interrupt you. I wanted to make sure you could finish your thought. But you said that so well. So now, obviously, it seems like most of your time these days, I would say, are spent in 2 buckets. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume sales and marketing. And I know that you focus mostly on inbound. And then obviously the other side of that is then account management, right? Like long-term client retention.
Yeah. And I mean, because I use third party, most of my client fulfillment, the actual like results part of it is super easy. Like I'll meet once a week with my account manager at Invisible PPC. We'll just go over all the accounts and real quickly. It's like 30 minutes a week. Then that allows me to have a pulse on it, really treat Invisible PPC as a partner and not just someone who I expect and demand great results from. It's like, hey, we should try this. Like, hey, I probably have some ideas too. So, let's work together on it. But the majority of my time is definitely spent on sales and marketing. That's what I love doing. And that's what you should love doing too, because it's like the most profitable part of your agency is booking appointments and closing those appointments. And then my actual client work and customer success systems probably, take me anywhere from 1 to 2 hours a week.
Wow.
That's to manage like all the rest of my customers and make sure they're happy.
That's awesome. In a conversation that we were having right before we got started, you talked about how you approach your marketing in a mathematical way. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Yeah, this is a pretty cool way to think about it. And when you start thinking about your marketing in like a mathematical way, really anyone can do it. Like anyone can have a profitable funnel if they think about it logically, rationally, and mathematically. So you start with what's the maximum that I can spend to acquire a client. Okay, so setup fee plus plus 1 month of retainer profit, let's say. So if it's a 2K setup fee, 1K a month, there's $3,000. Let's say you have $2,000 margin. So, okay, I can spend up to $2,000 to acquire a client. and then you work backwards. What's my close rate? What's my cost per appointment? What's my cost per lead? What's my cost per click? And it's literally just a very mathematical funnel, and you need to just put X amount of dollars in here to get X amount of appointments out here. And as long as you can reliably close, a number of those appointments, I mean, if you're getting $200 appointments, you just have to close 1 in 10 to be profitable, right? But if you're getting $200 appointments, chances are you're going to be closing a heck of a lot more than 1 in 10. So that's where it's scalable. And then in terms of playing with those numbers, it's like, what can I do to get a lower cost per appointment, and what can I do to sell more of those appointments? So you can play with your offer, you can play with your promise, you can reduce the friction in terms of people getting on the phone with you, and then in terms of closing, you can play with your setup fees, you can play with the term length, the terms, the ad spend, the costs to get more people to close. So really, it is just a mathematical numbers game, and if someone wants to set up a system like this, they absolutely can. They just need to know their numbers.
I love it. I think you said something that might have slipped by people's minds a little bit too. And like with running lots of traffic, right? It's a whole lot easier to get traffic to break even, right? Or at $2,000 when you have to spend it versus if you're trying to sell something for $7 or $27. Which one's easier? I mean, it's the one that you got 2K, right? Like it's a lot harder to mess that one up. It's a lot easier to make that work. But I think as agency owners, we're used to telling people, do this advertising and it'll work, but we're really used to doing it ourselves. Like, what would you tell somebody that was like, I get it, Mike, I got to be all about the recurring. And yes, that makes sense. I'll break even to get that monthly recurring. I'll spend that 2K. What would you tell them, right? Like, how do they not get scared on that outlay of that initial cash, running ads and putting $2,000 out there and hoping that it works?
Totally. And that's like by far the thing that I see agency owners struggle with the most is how can you take the emotion out of your initial ad spend before you see that return on investment? And I mean, the true answer, the answer that you don't want to hear is that you can't. Like, I mean, if you're in a position where you're going to spend that $2,000 and that's going to take food off your table, probably don't do that. But if you're in a position where, I mean, you do want to grow, you have a business or you're starting a business and you want to set up a system like this, like you have to just try to find a way mentally to distance your emotions from your ad spend and have a way to trust, a way to believe, and a way to trust, and a scientific process to manage those ads on I would say every 3 days you want to be altering your ads and paying attention to metrics. So you're never spending too much money without actually adjusting your ads. Would come into play when your say your cost per click is too high. Okay, if that's too high, then do this. If your cost per lead is too high, okay, if your cost per lead is too high, then you do this. And you have a process, a process for responding to any of those factors so that you do feel more in control and you are more in control instead of just like, okay, I'm gonna hit go, close my eyes, put a pillow over my head for a week and then hope that I have appointments, right? It doesn't work like that. And if you think it's gonna work like that, you're gonna fail.
That's very well said. So
makes sense.
Yeah, a system, a framework, and you got to kind of detach as well. You got to be okay putting that money up. What do you think is a good budget for somebody to start with and say, like, this is what I'm going to invest, and even if I spend like 75% of that and nothing happens, I'm going to put it all in no matter what. Like, what's the disconnect, like, dollar amount that you think somebody should be like willing to invest without making crazy reactions with it?
Yeah, I would say that $2,000 threshold if you're selling an agency service like this. I mean, if you spend $2,000 and you don't book an appointment, you're the problem. You didn't do enough research on the front end. And I know that scares a lot of people because they're like, how can I trust in my research? But I mean, you pick a niche, you talk to that niche to figure out what their problems are, and that's where you get your messaging. And as long as you're not someone who's hiding behind their computer screen and you don't want to reach out to and actually talk to people and have conversations. If you have a couple conversations with people or you've had sales calls with these people in the past, well, you have your messaging right there. You're going to take the messaging, you're going to take what is important to them, put that in your advertising, and that's how you get appointments. So it will work, but you can't guess.
Yep.
Unless you are in that industry, unless you are a plumber or you are an electrician or you have one of those businesses that you're trying to advertise for, you can't guess what their biggest problems and desires are. You're going to be wrong. Your costs are going to be through the roof, and you're not going to get appointments.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, you got to understand the marketplace. You got to do some research. If you're not already in that niche, you got to talk to them and understand, how to speak to them, but also, like you said, what their desires are, what their fears are, what they need help with. You need to make sure that your ads are speaking to them, or you're just going to come off like everybody else in the marketplace and not really have that like niche expert type of appeal or approach that really you've been able to pull off inside your marketing.
Want to know who does really great market research?
Yeah.
Every Fortune 500 company.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Want to know who doesn't? Most agencies. Right? And there's a reason for that. It's because, that's how you're successful. These Fortune 500 companies, they do market research. They have these like town halls. They get people together. They ask them questions. They get their behavior. And if you don't do even a little bit of that, you're breaking a huge cardinal rule.
I want to shift focus for a second, and I want to talk to you about profit margins and team structure and what your thoughts are for the future in your agency. You got a successful agency. You got a bunch of PPC customers, obviously. Guys like you, gals like you that I speak with in a similar situation have already been tempted by, have already made a change or thinking of making a change in the future. And that change is, quote unquote, taking fulfillment in-house, right? At Invisible PPC, like we know that that conversation happens all the time. And it's funny, a couple of weeks back, maybe even 2 months back, we had this conversation. I said, Mike, I'm curious, at what point are we just a stepping stone and you end up taking fulfillment in-house? At what point do you look at it and go, yeah, that's just too much money. I'm going to bring that in-house and I'm going to save myself some money. And we had a really candid conversation. And I loved kind of your thought process because it is very unique. Can you share your thoughts on kind of that topic?
The way that I kind of look at that is, number one, like, yeah, there's always the financial conversation in my head. It's like, I could be saving this much money if I brought in house. I could hire some really, really smart, people in the Philippines to do this for me. And that it does bring on problems. Like, yeah, you save some money, but it does bring on problems of its own. So I go back to my life ethos, right? Like, I'm trying to do more with less, trying not to work my ass off. I'm trying not to build a big team because I've managed teams before. I've had teams. It can cause problems, but I mean, at my current model, getting to my next goal is 100K a month. And to get to 100K a month, like I've written it out and done the math, like really I only need an account manager and a salesperson. So as long as I keep advertising in-house with Invisible PPC for most of my accounts, I can, $100,000 per month after their costs plus 2 staff. I mean, it's still over 60K a month in profit. I don't know about you, but I mean, that'll fund my lifestyle just fine. So I could bring it in-house, but again, you got to kind of weigh that with what your life goal is, what your plan is, and is it in line with where you want to go? So for me, I mean, right now it's not. Maybe it is in the future, and maybe we'll have that conversation later, Joe. But
at what point do you think that there's breakage, right? At what point would you like maybe consider it? At what point does the business, in your point of view, need more than just you, right? At what point do you need an account manager because the system's too stressed with the way that you run your 80/20 digital marketing agency?
Totally. I actually have a really cool time management tool that I use. It's less of a tool and more of a exercise that I do every couple of months. And basically it's like a time audit where I see where I'm spending my time. And if I see that I start spending more than a comfortable amount of time on a certain task, then I start looking to outsource it. And I mean, it's not just me doing everything. I have two VAs that work with me that do all my administrative stuff because I don't like to do that. But the more that you can, outsource like that, the more ability you have to do the things that are important. Like my customers occasionally do like hopping on the phone with me, and it's nice that it's not an account manager. I mean, it's not mandatory that happens, but it is a nice thing. And does it help with churn? Probably, right? So it's about, what you like to do, and if the system does get too stressed, then yeah, of course, then we'll look at hiring. But right now it's not, and as long as you set up the customer success systems properly, it shouldn't get stressed for a very long time.
That's awesome, man. So, real quick, I'd be remiss, and I think we would be, I think our audience would go, hey, what the heck? Like, we didn't talk about COVID yet. And this has been the year of COVID, so to speak. And I know that my team did some research, and since last October, we know that you collected a bunch of money in setup fees, you added new clients. Can you tell us about how you got, first off, what were the results, kind of high level, if you would, and then how'd you get such great results? I don't want to misquote your numbers.
Yeah. I think I don't have them in front of me, but I think in October it was something like eight new agency clients, 16K in setup fees. Yeah, over $100,000 in annual contract value. I have very little churn, so I'm pretty confident I'll be collecting between 80 and 90% of that in a month. And I did not, it was a month where I really didn't work very much. COVID affected everybody. I mean, back in March, it was huge, but now, people, even though COVID is still like ravaging the world, people are still trying to like run their businesses. They still need more customers now as much as ever. So a lot of people have let their foot off the gas, which I think has, made a little bit of opportunity. And I just followed the same mathematical system that I talked about earlier, right? I just made sure that my cost per clicks were within KPI, my cost per lead were in KPI, my appointments, and I mean, my sales rate might have been a little bit higher than average in that month, but um, it was yeah, it was cool. And there are always going to be external factors. I mean, we're not always going to be in a global pandemic, but it's going to be this, that, or another thing, and you just need to be able to not necessarily pivot, but adjust slightly and just be prepared.
Yeah, man, I love what you said there. I think that there is a lot of opportunity in the marketplace right now, especially for people that can get results and they can show their expertise. They can show that they get results. There's definitely been a pullback from a lot of people in the marketplace in terms of marketing and marketing services, I believe. And then I love that you talked about how, like, man, it's just back to that mathematic formula. I was just last week at this mastermind in Miami with agency owners, and this guy basically said the same thing and said, in the first quarter of Q1, I'm spending 100 grand in marketing. And I'm like, what do you mean you're spending 100 grand in marketing? He's like, well, I mean, we've been spending like 10 grand a month, and like the return on investment that we're getting is like insane. He's like, so we've just been like testing a bunch of different things and methods and kind of getting them to minimum viable. And they've been working like crazy. And so Q1, I've set aside 100 grand to invest in marketing. Like, you really own an agency? Like, I've never heard an agency say, I'm going to dump 100 grand in marketing this quarter.
Yeah, that's definitely bold, and I think that goes to show more than anything that there's a huge opportunity right now if your messaging can resonate, and like you said, if you can provide your clients with good results on the back end.
That's awesome. So, man, I want to talk about what's next for you. What's on the horizon? Like, you got introduced into the agency market. You were a part of this just company that just blew up, 0 to 10 million a year in revenue. I'm sure that was just a crazy experience. You gave us some takeaways. You've built what most people would say is like the agency of their dreams, right? Like, you live like the nomad lifestyle without being a nomad, right? Like, you've 80-20'd your business. You're living obviously comfortably. You're living well. You're spending time with your family and doing the things and hobbies. I know you're into piano and running and working out. You're living what most people would say is like the ideal lifestyle. And I know from experience that, like, when you start to meet those revenue goals and your bases are covered and you are doing things like that, that your priorities start to shift. Your priorities start to change. And so I'm curious, man, like, what's next for Mike?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, yeah, my agency it's been a lot of fun, but there's really only so much work that I can do. So does get a little bit boring. And I'm an entrepreneur. I mean, I always like a challenge. So as much as I like you said, playing piano, working out, running, hanging with my family, things like that, I'm up for my next challenge, and it's kind of started a few months ago already. But right now, what I'm trying to do is like this business model is amazing, and I feel like not enough people know this business model and even know that it's a thing. Like when I started looking for side hustles, I didn't even know it was a thing. So I'm super passionate about this business model now, which is, which I've already explained. I don't need to explain it again. So I truly do want to help some more people learn this business model and apply it to their agencies, or even start an agency and grow kind of like a lifestyle agency. And I'm challenging myself in this next quarter. I'm actually I'm going to bring on 5 students and help each one of them get to $20,000 per month recurring by the end of next quarter. So that's the challenge that I'm setting for myself. I've put together kind of like it's not polished by any means yet, but a very specific framework for exactly how I set up my business, what I did, my thought processes, and I'm going to be personally coaching these 5 students over the next quarter to all hit 20K per month by the end of Q1.
Dude, that's awesome. I think that at that last event that I was just at last weekend, from some of the most successful people in that room, guys that went from 0 to 6 and 7 figure businesses, their mindset started to change, and they thought about giving back and what's really important to them and how do they feel good during the day, like what's exciting to them. And one thing that I found is similar to what you just said, is like giving back to a plumber is very different than giving back to a fellow like entrepreneur and agency or somebody that you would view as a peer. So I say, like, I love the goal and the challenge of helping 5 students get to 20K MRR by the end of next quarter. And not only doing that, but doing it by doing less, like, because the money's one thing, but the impact, as I think you've nailed really well, is a completely different thing.
Totally. Yeah. The money is obviously important. Like we wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't an income and a way to provide for your family. But there is something to say about actually like getting great results for people and seeing people succeed and changing their lives and impacting them in ways that you couldn't even imagine. And that's super cool. And if you can do both, then you're, super fortunate. So that's really what I want to do in this next quarter, is be able to really impact 5 people and make that type of change and see where it goes from there. But I mean, the first step is helping 5 people hit that goal, because that is absolutely life-changing for a lot of people.
Dude, that's awesome. I want to support you, and I want to support you in this. Let's do this. Eduardo, you're going to be listening to this, doing the show notes. Let's put in a link, man, digitaltriggers.io/Mike. And let's make that go to Mike's page to get more information about this, or your calendar booking, wherever you want. Just tell me where you want that to go. But man, I know that so many of the people that listen to the show would love to follow you on that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I can, I'll think through that, what makes the most sense. But yeah, Eduardo, you'll get the link.
I want to wrap it up. I know that we're getting close to the top of the hour too. So I always ask one question, and I'm excited to ask you this question. Instead of asking you to recommend 3 books, which I feel like every podcast does, Mike, what are your favorite 3 books? I do something a little bit different. Ask, like, what's the one book that's made the biggest impact on the way that you do business, and why?
Oh man. I would probably say, so I'm going to go with 2 books.
Okay.
One is like I think super obvious. The One Thing by Gary Keller.
Yep.
I don't know if, I'm sure that's been recommended a million times on your podcast. Super important. Just like focus on the one thing that's going to move the needle the most. Pareto principle, everything like that. And then the other, I need to just get the name of it. I'm blanking on it. The other one's going to is called The Big Leap.
Okay.
By Gay Hendricks. Have you heard of that?
I haven't heard of that one. No.
So the main concept on this one, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs should read this, is the concept of upper limiting yourself. So people will say they don't deserve that, or they don't think they can become, this person that they want to become. So they're putting a ceiling on mentally, subconsciously, on where they think they can get to. So yeah, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, incredible read.
That's awesome. And The One Thing is a great read as well. Definitely one of my all-time favorites. And Gary, just asked, what's the one thing that you've got to do today to make basically all these other things tomorrow happen and null and void, basically. And so when you think about that, how's that apply to your business? I'm curious.
The one thing I think it's been pretty evident on this whole podcast, right? It's like, how can you say no more, right? Say no to the things that are going to be time sucks and just say yes to the one or two things that are going to move the needle the most. And for me, the things that move the needle the most are getting inbound booked appointments on my calendar and closing those appointments. That moves the needle the most for me. That gets me the most revenue. That allows me the time freedom to go pick up my daughter early from daycare, or go on an extra long dog walk, or, whatever else I want to do, play piano for 3 hours a day sometimes. I mean, I'm not that good, but I enjoy it. But yeah, I mean, it's really like, how can I do, you said it earlier, how can you do less with more? Do more with less. Do more with less. And that's about cutting things out of your life that don't add to the value of your life ethos.
Man, I love that. Dude, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. And we'll have to definitely get you on after next quarter, after we can come back and we can share some case studies with your customers and these new agencies crushing it with inbound and following your model. Man, I just want to say it's a breath of fresh air. The successful agencies that I see are often way overloaded. Their profit margins are awful, absolutely awful. They got huge teams. And I often see them looking at the business that they built. And they're like, man, I should just be back at that other job. Like, I'm working twice as much. My quality of life sucks. And so, man, I think you're a huge refreshment to the agency industry. And I know our people are going to love the episode, man.
Okay. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, we'll give me a shout a bit.
Let's do it. All right, guys. Sayonara.
Thanks for tuning in to Show Me the Nuggets. If you've been enjoying the podcast and find our content helpful, please visit our Apple Podcast page, hit the subscribe button, and leave us a review. Joe and the whole team have been working hard to bring more value to the show. Your feedback will go a long way in helping us make the show better and reach a wider audience.